you doing?
Good.
Doing good.
Yeah, welcome everybody. This is Mark and Daniel today, and we have my really good friend and hero, Jon Tulio, who's somewhat warmer than Daniel in San Francisco.
Oh yeah.
And
Hard to believe.
Daniel, yeah, are you thawing out down there in Texas?
Yeah, I'm staying inside, and that's how we thaw out here.
So it's pretty cold down there at the moment, huh?
Yeah, today it was like I think it was between 7 and 9 degrees Fahrenheit. So
wow, you don't sort of. I just don't sort of click with cold and snow around the place in Texas. You know, it's just like it doesn't seem to fit.
In Dallas.
Yeah. Well, if it's gonna be anywhere, it's gonna be Dallas. Really, that's
really
what.
Okay.
Like, yeah, you get the hurricanes in Houston, you get the ice in Dallas.
Okay.
So that's kind of but usually it's like a 1-day event, 2-day event. But we've been under this cold for probably 4 or 5 days now.
Wow.
So yeah.
Well, hope you thaw out.
We will.
Hey, my kids were swimming today.
Hey, don't do that.
It is cold here for us, but it was a heated pool, and they love the water. But that's just
I've
the
seen
difference.
people on the beach on Facebook. I was like,
Oh,
what?
really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to cool down here.
Yeah.
Well, you told me that it was like overnight minus 24 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, which is minus
Right.
11 degrees Fahrenheit here.
Well, I was just outside, and it's 24 degrees. It's just midday, and it's 24 degrees Celsius on the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like. Anyway, it's really good. Well, Jon, thanks for joining us again. We really enjoyed the last time that you were on. That's why we said, hey, we want you to come back and just chat with us a little bit more, because we are all continuing just to discover things in the kingdom and love to hear about what's happening and what other people are seeing and taking place. And so, if people don't know you, let me just introduce you. As a really good friend of mine. At the moment, you're in San Francisco, but when you're allowed to travel, you and your wife Marsha and your 2 sons are in the Philippines, where you're the director of the Deeper School. But you're also, are you a director of N2L, or the founder, or co-founder, or what's the title?
All of that.
All of that. So you have a foundation called Nothing to Lose, which you shared about last time, which is doing some work now in Bacolod with scholars. I saw that, and in Rombolon, and we're going to ask you a little bit more about that. But
Sure.
You really are, from what I'm seeing, maybe it could be called social entrepreneurs, and seeing things. And of course, one of the things that we talk a lot about, because I think Jesus talked a lot about it too, was transformation. It's lives being transformed, or we want to see cultures transformed. In a Filipino context, we want to see families, barangays, we want to see cities, which in other contexts is really main family, suburbs, cities, and in countries, we want to see countries transformed. Because it's obvious that there are many things that are not working in our world, and that heaven has some solutions to those issues. One of the things that I've heard lots of times, and I've seen, Jon, we've seen transformation in people's lives in the slums and in different places, or students that have come into Deeper School. But I'm always really interested with the scholars, the work that you do with the scholars, because I think it's pretty exciting that somebody who's in a remote area like Rombolon, or somebody in Bacolod, for instance, who hasn't got really much of a hope of going to college, even though they may be gifted, although they may have desire to go to college, often can't get there because of economic situations, can't often get there because of, and they really need someone to partner with them, but rarely is there somebody who will partner with them. So what's it feel like? What's it feel like to actually now you've been doing this for a few years. Now to have people who have been to college, graduated from college, and you've still got more coming through to college. It must be pretty exciting to be able to bring hope to somebody where there's no hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing because we, didn't like set out to create what has evolved into what we're doing with the scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, it was just, hey, I want to share my passion for basketball, and the culture here, or in Romblon when we were first started out, you know, they didn't have a lot of like highly organized training and things like that. And honestly, like our attitude was, my best friend and I were like, hey, these guys love this just as much as anyone else in the United States or anything. Why not? Why can't we give them, honor for their passion for this, and just let's give them a great all-star camp. Let's give them some great teaching, and let's give them all,
Mm.
uniforms and things like that, like the way we wish that we had it when we were young, where someone
Mm-hmm.
recognized us and you know gave us shoes or uniforms and just had, catered to
Mm-hmm.
us. And
Yeah.
so that's how we started out. And we didn't even know that we were going to do scholarships.
So you really just started with something that you had, something you're
Yeah.
just passionate about, and you just thought, oh well, we'll just do this, and then it's developed into it.
Yeah. And so, and that has kind of become, our MO now, is just like, hey, let's start with what we're passionate about, but when it came to starting these scholarships, one of the things that was very interesting, what I noticed over time and then was able to reflect on when we first started, it's, I remember soon after our first camp in 2008, our first basketball camp, we had selected different people from that camp who we thought, by interviewing them and knowing what their needs were, watching their work ethic in the camp, and we'd selected some potential names for being scholars. And so, um, as soon as we moved, I had not moved to the Philippines yet, and as soon as we moved there, I scheduled a time to go back to Romblon and have like a dinner and invite all these people with their
Mm-hmm.
parents and things like that, right? And so we did that. We invited them. We shared with what we were about, and we were just very new at this, but
Mm-hmm.
we got to know the parents a little bit, and I could see where like the parents were like, okay, this can be some help for us. Some were very excited, some were cautious as they didn't know who we were. And I think the caution is not worried about you might do something bad to them or take advantage, but just
Mhm.
if it's real, if it's
Yeah.
real. Like I just met these guys for a few days. Now, they're telling my parents that they want to help me go to college. And it wasn't until I went back right before enrollment that we all sat in a circle with these kids, and they were filling out their applications to college. Some didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know what they wanted to do. And I could see it in their mind where they were like, okay, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it went from the third time that I met with
Mm-hmm.
them, they're like, okay, this is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really fun to see. And now those same guys are all been working for multiple years. We have them come back and talk in the camps. And I remember we had a special session with our alumni. Um, One guy who I would consider like our top guy in
Mm-hmm.
all the years, right? And we always still use him his name's Raymond. We still use him as a example to other scholars.
Mm-hmm.
He's done real well in his career. But he came back and he talked to our current scholars, and he was telling them, I remember sitting in that circle
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing how to fill out my application.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Coach, I remember you said, listen, life's going to get a lot harder than this. If you can't fill out this application, you're going to have a hard time. And, it's funny that he had remembered that. And it just kind of blesses me. And there's a bunch of stories. but just to see that go from there, and like you talk about transformation, it's just this same guy before he graduated. We have these values that we talk about in our foundation and try to give people more of an idea of what nothing to lose means, the words. And I remember this young guy, Raymond, coming to me and he goes, Coach, I'm adopting these values for myself. I mean, it doesn't matter if there's an organization or no organization. This is how I want to like live my life, challenging fear, pursuing growth, exhibiting passion, and just like things like that, So, I mean, that's the fun of doing this,
Yeah. So to go back to what you were saying, and I think this is really something quite important, because I think that people, when they are thinking about making a difference in the world, they don't realize that it starts with just what you got. What are you passionate about? What do you got in your hand? What have you got now? Just use that. And I think, the Father's really, really good at bringing other things in when you start.
Yes.
We've heard for lots and lots of years now, we say it, I say it all the time. The key to breakthrough is always follow through. It's like, just start. Just start with what you've got. Just start with the prayer you've got. Just start with the passion you've got in your heart. Just start somewhere. And I think that's a real key thing. Do you think so? Do you agree that that's...
I 100% agree, and I'll throw another thing out there: just how much fun it is to see other people grab onto that idea.
Yeah.
Like people who didn't think, because I believe that it's created in us the idea to make an impact, to take dominion, to expand God's kingdom, and people want to make an impact. People want to make a difference, no matter like how much it's been pushed down. But not everyone believes they can, and they don't for sure. Well, I'm not those people who don't believe they can, for sure they don't believe that they can do it with what they have. And when you see someone grab hold of, well, maybe I can do this, but I have this. And one of my buddies who's the N2L director in the Region 6, and that's the Bacolod area. I remember, I brought him to come out to Romblon, and he did an awesome job. And I remember him saying to me when he was listening to the scholars talk, because what we do is the scholars run our camps at this point. And it's a way to put them in a pressure situation and see who rises up. But really, these young people, they desire responsibility. That's something I learned, And so, after the camps are done, we usually do a thing with just the scholars and say, how'd it go? What'd you feel this time? How was your experience? And I remember my buddy from Bacolod, he sat there and he was like, man, this is awesome. And he said, I think I'd like to do something similar, but with jiu-jitsu, because that's my thing. How you're comfortable with basketball, I'm comfortable in that, and then to see where he's at now with it, I mean, and then and the rest of the people on our team, it's all a similar story, which they had a desire to make an impact, but they weren't sure if what they had was enough. When that clicks, that what they have can be a starting point and they can be confident, man, it's that's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah, and I think, if I sum it up like this, people can have dreams, right? But they often don't know how to get from where they are to where they could be. It's that gap place. It's that gap part that they need help in. And they need empowering, and they need, someone to coach them, just what you're talking about. And, one of the things that I've seen, John, with the Deeper School, for instance, Deeper School is about a 3-month program, right, where students go 3 nights a week, which is quite a commitment. And you have teachers, and I'm one of the teachers, and I come in there at the beginning, near to the beginning of the school. And I'm there usually at graduation too. And one of the things that surprises me, it surprises me every time, that the the difference just in that 3 months, the difference between when they first start and when they graduate is like night and day. Like they are just so different. There is such a difference in just 3 months.
Yeah.
And I know that one of the subjects that you teach is something that we talk about, and it's talked about a lot. And some people can become quite familiar or too familiar with it because we talk about it a lot. But that is about identity. And I think in every culture, where people, identity is a really important thing, is to understand. And of course, we talk about it being multidimensional, so it's not something that you ever arrive at it, but it's a continuing thing. But so, how about you tell us maybe some things that you teach, or some things that you found, or it's revelation to you about identity, because we would have to say it's pretty. I mean, Daniel was just talking to us before we came on here about just seeing something recently about a company that's not a kingdom-based company or kingdom-based training organization, talking about how important identity is. That's right, Daniel?
Yeah, that was had their two first blocks in their education was about who, like your identity. In other words, who you are. Are you a leader or are you an entrepreneur? Like who are you? And then second one was your beliefs, because they go to talk about if you can know who you are, but then what is it you believe? Like that's going to be the foundational things, And talking about identity, I was just sitting thinking, you were saying, Mark, how sometimes it's something we might get familiar with, or something we talk about a lot. But it's interesting because especially in America, and I think really all over the world right now, identity is a huge thing. I'm hearing it on the news all the time, right? It's like, what do you identify as? Not only is it just gender, it's like, are you African American, or are you white, or are you it's all, everything's all about identity. What you identify as puts you in a column, it seems like, and where identity is such a huge thing. So I mean, I think it's it's on the forefront right now. I mean,
absolutely.
So, share with us, John.
Well, so identity is a huge theme in the deeper school. One of my favorite verses is John 10:10. Where Jesus talks about the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but he comes to give us life in the fullest. And I love going through all the different translations and things like that. And it's life greater than you can ever imagine. And things like that. And for me, and in the school, our perspective is the keys to living in the fullness of life that Jesus promised is really in two things. It's knowing who you are, and knowing who God is, and knowing who you are. And those things are really related to each other. And, while, I am currently in learning in the child development field right now, back in school, one of the things we talk a lot about is culture and cultural identity and things like that, because we deal in a multicultural environment here. It's not so much like that in the Philippines, which is, very interesting, but here it is. And so when you're working with children from many different backgrounds, many different home lives, many different cultures, and not just ethnic cultures, just different beliefs, like you talked about. And so, and when we talk, if we were just talking about like cultural identity, right, those are hugely important things. And then, but for us, when we talk about, there's even a greater level that's higher than our cultural identity or ethnic identity, which is our kingdom identity, or just who you're really created to be, who your creator created you to be, and like at the basics, but the basics is the most important. What we talk about in deeper is the basis for our identity is we are dearly loved children of God. Okay. I am an entrepreneur. I am a coach, and those are part of things that identify me, that I do believe I was created by God to be that way, and that's part of my identity. But those are, for me and for what we teach, is that those come under being a dearly loved child of God, and so that I talk a lot. We talk a lot about in school. About that, about discovering that, and it's not, many of the people who come to school have read those words in the Bible, that we're dearly loved children, sons and daughters, heirs, princes and princesses, like people of authority, but daring to live it and being vulnerable to live it with the ups and downs of what that comes because of how culture around you deals with that is how you establish it, and then when and then it becomes really a powerful thing when I can walk into meetings. They're going to be good or bad. Like, after we get off of this, I'm going to think, hey, did I do a good job? Did I speak on these things that Daniel and Mark wanted me to? Gosh, they had me on a second time. And that's what I'm going to think about. But it's not going to ever affect my identity that I'm a dearly loved child of God. I'm going to be a dearly loved child of God who didn't do that well on this thing. But it's not going to, you see, like, and so those are a lot of the things that we try to discover. And when you come, Mark, sometimes you'll teach on the kingdom, you'll teach on the prophetic, and others will teach on different things. But the theme that will always go through there is how those things touch who you were created to be, who your identity is in Christ, who God is, and where we fit into the world.
Good. I think that, like you said, identity is so multifaceted. There's so much that you can speak on it. What other subjects do you teach on? Because you do quite a bit of the times in between the speakers that have come. So what other subjects? Tell me what your favorite subject is.
My favorite is discovering your passions and developing your dreams.
Okay.
It's hard to develop your dreams if you haven't figured out your passions yet. Yeah. So over the time, my teaching has evolved into the development part. I'll touch on it, but I'll usually go deeper in like workshops outside of school with that. But helping people kind of it's if you come from, I came from a culture that and it's not an ethnic culture, but just a culture, maybe a church culture or what, that didn't think that something like you could be passionate about basketball, but you could still serve God through that passion. It's like you would have to do something else, or you have to make sure that at halftime of the games, you do a prayer meeting or like something like that, or make sure like it had to be directly with that, with something religious or spiritual. And I find like a lot of students, it's even just hard for them, especially in the context of like, I don't know if you would call it a discipleship program or anything like that, but just to think that something I just have a passion for that doesn't have to do with like church or something like that, that's important to identify. Like I find that attitude sometimes, and so I love to see people break out of that, because I was taught that any favor that you have is meant to be used to expand the kingdom. And for me, the passions that I have for things that I love, that it's favor, because it's just some little thing that gives me so much joy. It's kind of irrational and doesn't make sense, like something small like that gives me so much joy. Man, that's favor from God. So for me, if I look at my passions and interests as favor, then how is that going to be used in a real authentic context to expand God's kingdom? So that's kind of how I approach it. And so I love teaching about that. I love talking about it. I share a lot of stories and try to help people fill in the blanks for, believing that also.
So part of that, isn't it, is that, for a long, long time, we had this separation between spiritual, sacred church things and then your secular life.
Right.
So that you could serve God in a church capacity, or the greatest way to serve God was to pastor a church, for instance,
Right.
or to be a missionary, or wherever else, to go to another country. And what we've understood, certainly in the last 10 plus years, maybe the last 20 years, is a breaking down of understanding that really brings us back to what was always there, but we didn't see it as that. Is that there is no separation.
Mm-hmm.
There's one life.
Yes.
And the fact that you serve God in doing this, or you serve him doing that, or wherever else, just because it's not within the four walls of the church doesn't mean that it's not important to him, or it's important to the advancement of the kingdom. And so what you've tended to have is a fortress mentality in people's thinking. Whereas, like, well, we can just run into the fortress and I'm safe there, but if I get out into the other places, I will be influenced, or I will be affected, by the secular environment.
Yep.
And it's you and I well know, if you go back many centuries, or even just a century, I think, the best schools, colleges, hospitals, I mean, there's just so many great teaching facilities and hospitals that were established by the church.
That's right.
Because the church had a view that they were, affecting society and bringing about transformation. And then we see a period of time where it comes back into that fortress mindset. So I think that's one of the greatest challenges, is helping people to understand. And working in the Philippines, it's quite a religious culture, and so that must be a challenge for you to help people to change that way of thinking, right?
Yeah, it's I think the benefit that we have in rising to that challenge is, we do have, I mean, such a love for, the nation. We have a familiarity with the culture that we grew up with, but also, we we had this opportunity to go there and live there and kind of immerse ourselves in the culture, and so to just, it's challenging. It's challenging on a number of levels, because there are religious things, but I also grew up with religious things, so some things are familiar. But also, it's just, you know, that I think that is also part of the culture, keeping the kind of compartmentalizing, like, this is my life here, this is my work life, this is this, this is that, and it's okay, you know, and I don't know. For me, I think that is more of a challenge,
Yep.
than I think that comes back to the identity.
Yep.
If I know who my true self, or trying to live that out, I want to live that out across everything that I do, because it's if it's powerful, like, I want to, someone would ask me, like, who should come to deeper school? Should it be pastors? Should it be like people like working in the church or things like that? And my idea to them was like, well, if don't you want your doctor to be confident in who he is in Christ? Like, if your doctor's a Christian, or like, like, how good of a doctor would you be then? How good of a teacher would you be then, if you knew who you were in Christ, who you knew your identity was, if you knew what you were created to do, if you filled with the Holy Spirit, like, so. Go ahead, Mark.
But that's an interesting point, though, isn't it? In asking that question, what it really sort of shows. I'm not being critical, but people who are so used to being trained for church service rather than being equipped for life. And you'll just notice that we have a friend here just from the Philippines, Olay Espiritu. So hi, Olay. Olay is doing some quite significant things in a marketplace environment, and very powerful prophetic voice, and doing some great things in Manila. Got a lot of connections with people that she's great. And we just just say hello to a couple of people. Dave Champion, who's right up, great guy. He's a champion. And Tony and Angie Martinez are from Wyoming. They are from Cheyenne, Wyoming. Cheyenne. So good to see them. I think we could talk for a long time just on identity, can't we? Because you see so many examples of it. People who get their identity from doing something, for instance. The difficulty with that is that when they don't get to do something, they feel nothing. They feel worse than nothing.
Yeah.
So it's such a freeing thing when you realize who you are.
Yeah.
It's almost like you can cast off other sorts of things, and it's like, are you affected by when things don't go? Of course, but it doesn't damage the very root of where else. So I'm really keen to keep pushing you a little bit as far as
sure.
Okay, what are your other subjects that you teach, or what are some sort of things? Because I think you've got some revelation that we want to draw out of you a little bit here for people. So what else do you teach that you love?
In the school or like just in general?
School or in general. Let's not have a division between.
Sure. Yeah, you're right, Mark. Yeah, well, I mean,
Don't say that.
Do say that. Go
on. Well, I love working with young people, and so, but what happens is it's funny, in deeper school I will tell the students, because as I said last time, I feel like a lot of what Marsha and I's ministry in church is to show people that they can be outside of the church, and so I try to share a lot of what we do in our stories. And I laugh and I tell them, the things we do at deeper school, it's the same things I do with my scholars. It's the same things we talk about, the values that we've chosen for our lives, that we've chosen for the foundation, are things that are kingdom principles, things that we can pursue when we live out of our identity. So I guess that's one of the things I really enjoy doing is
Can I just butt in there? Because
yes,
you've said this a couple of times. You've mentioned this a few times about values. Mm-hmm. You mentioned about that scholar in Romulon who said, I want to make these values my values. So tell us about values, because I think there's a lot of people that just, if they really summed it and distilled it up, they realize that they have values too, particularly core values. But what are some of the values that you hold to?
Well, we talked about before about how like the name Nothing to Lose came about as a time of transformation for me that Holy Spirit was doing. And so I kind of like, in pursuing that and asking the Holy Spirit, like, what is living life with nothing to lose look like? The first thing that we value is challenging fear. That when we have fears or insecurities, that my past was to hide those things or just stay with my strengths, and that doesn't lead you to fullness of life, in my opinion and in my experience. So the first thing we talk about when people ask us what nothing to lose means, or ask it, what does it mean to me? It's really, the first is like challenging our fears. We're not meant to live in a spirit of fear.
Yes.
The other would be pursuing growth. Growing up, we have a high value for believing that you can grow, and going after that, because a lot of times when young people, and just as myself, growing up, you felt like, oh, he's good because he was born that way, or they're good at that because that's what they were born with. They're talented and things like that. And what I've discovered in many different areas, and especially spiritually, is just that, like, you know, we can grow. We're destined to grow. We were created to grow, and I can always, my question to, like, the scholars is always like, well, what are we doing? How are we going to get better this next time? What are the things we're going to attempt to get better, like win or lose? So that idea of um, pursuing growth, is what we would call like a value. That's something we value. Um, Another would be what I've wrestled with this terminology for like a long time, and it's risk excellence.
Hmm.
Because one, I think you kind of can define excellence for yourself, and I think that for me that means you know the tension of being happy in my identity, who I am now,
Hmm.
but desiring to really fulfill my destiny, to
Yep.
be all that I was created to be. So I don't need to be down because I'm still becoming, and when I have that, I can be all I can be, who I am right now. But to do that, to be excellent, whatever your definition is, our belief is it takes vulnerability. It takes putting yourself out there. You're gonna fail, and you're gonna have undesired, unforeseen consequences, unforeseen things, for whatever reason. We're still learning. And then the last is just exhibit passion in everything we do. I don't want to spend a lot of time in things that I'm not willing to really give myself to. And so I
Hmm.
think those are things that we call the nothing to lose values, but those are things that I value. I don't know if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's what you're going for, but yeah, that's kind of the things that we also encourage the people we work with to define those for themselves. Like, what does
Hmm.
that mean to you? What does it mean to you? But how do those specifically apply to your lives? Because we're at different places in our lives. You have different
Hmm.
fears than I do. You know, so I guess that will be a way to explain that. I don't know.
No, that does. Yeah, you're going to say something, Daniel?
Yeah, I was gonna say. So one thing I just wanted to touch on, maybe ask a question about is, so you talk about like overcoming the fears.
Hmm.
And I know that's a really big one from success. Like if people are going to see success in their life, fear is one of the big things that has to be dealt with. So what is that just, you just kind of, as you're doing identity and stuff, that just kind of gets worked in there? Or what do you guys teach about like fears, how to really move through those fears?
Well,
Do you guys have a certain class or something you do on that, or?
not necessarily. I think what
Mhm,
we try to do and again, this is our methodology and a lot of things, is
mhm,
just create. So in the school we would call them activations, right? Things like
mhm,
that, different things that are going to really try to move people out of their comfort zone. And I
mhm,
think to challenge that fear, we go back to what identity is, what our understanding of that is now, and our understanding of who God is, right? So
mhm,
like, if at basic I got, hey, you know what, I'm a dearly loved child of God, and
mhm,
and what how this activation goes, whether I get it right or wrong, that ain't gonna change that. So you're stepping out in that. And
mhm,
again,
Mm.
we do that in jiu-jitsu, we do that on all those things.
mhm.
I might not tell you you're a dearly loved child of God, in class, in jiu-jitsu class, but I'm gonna tell you, like, hey, you're a part of this. We're
Mhm,
not gonna, whatever you do here, like, you're learning. You're not gonna not be a part of this if you don't do this technique correctly, or whatever it is.
mhm,
But I think that's kind of the thing. I mean, we do, like, obviously, not obviously, but we'll talk about things we're going through, and specifically address fears or challenges
mhm.
that people are having. But that's kind of what I tell people is, when it comes to any of these challenges, my answer, I'm going back to, is who am I and who is God?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how I move forward with that perspective through that challenge. That's one of the things we do.
So we often see, even in our own lives, and we see it in other people too, an insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what it's like if you're feeling insecure, you don't know where you're fit, you don't know if you've done it right, you just feel vulnerable, you feel in a place where you could collapse at any moment, that type of sort of thing. And yet, I've heard Bill Johnson say that insecurity is just being secure in the wrong things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so even that, when you distill that down and you go back to it, means that they have a wrong understanding, usually a wrong understanding of who they are.
Yeah.
So that they understand that they're somebody when they get it right, when they get it perfect,
Right.
and
Right.
so therefore you have people who are all the time asking, did I do that okay? Did I do that right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I didn't do that right, then I'm nobody as a person.
Yes.
And so it's creating that separation between, and I know in when we teach in deeper school, it's, particularly when I do the prophetic teaching and that sort of stuff, there's no such thing as getting it wrong. Even if we're getting people to try and activate their words of knowledge, and they say an incorrect answer, or they say something that's not quite got it yet, it's like, well done. You've tried this, and we create these safe places that people can do something with and can experiment, because in the kingdom, I think we're supposed to do some experimentation. We're supposed to try things. I think the Father is more upset with us, if that's possible, that not trying than trying and feeling like we failed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But failure, therefore, is that we know it's an event; it's not a person.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you fail at doing something, you have a real big tick and a smile on the Father's face because you tried.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're talking about at confronting fears. It's like, fear is destined to go.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is absolutely destined to no longer be around if you confront it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it only gets to stay because you've given it permission to remain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what I like about fear is that fear is always so big until you confront it, and then on the other side, you're like, "Wow, that was nothing." Jeez, I wish I would have did that a while ago.
Well, we know what fear stands for: false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what fear stands for, and we know that fear is believing in that what you cannot see will take place.
Yeah.
But then the definition of faith is believing that what you cannot see will take place too. So they're just negative. One's a negative, one's a positive.
Yeah.
I know that you have lots of stories, Jon Tulio. And if you're anything like me, it's trying to remember them.
Yeah.
But can you think of anything at the moment, whether it's what we're talking about or not, just to, maybe life-changing or, something? Is anything you can remember? Can you remember anything at the moment that you want to just share just as we're coming to an end?
I think that my heart is really that people would know really believe that what matters to them matters to God. And that's not just like, I tell that to young people when it's like, things they're passionate about and things like that, because that's what I found. But it's not just that. It's all those cares that and God, when we talk about fears, God's not going, oh, you fear, man, you no good guy, things like that. It matters to him. It matters to him. Because that's what you're going through, and not to take condemnation. And he's not condemning you for that. He wants to walk with you through those things. And I think if the best way that we can approach those things, in my experience, the best way that I've been able to approach those things is really just stepping out. Stepping out of comfort zone, giving God a chance to prove himself, to prove who he is, that you believe he is, that he really does care about those things. If you act like that, and he'll prove himself, and it doesn't, these things that we're talking about, why I have expressed what nothing to lose means, what those values are. It's because I need to go back to those things every time I get to a new situation. Different fears come up, different situations, and I have to go back to, like, hey, this is who I was created to be. This is who I want to be. This is how I've said I want to live my life, and this is what God has confirmed in my life. And now, and gonna move forward, and it never changes. What changes is how fast I go back to it. I get better. I go back to it quicker, instead of like going for like 2 weeks, and then and then So I guess that's something that is just
Yep.
consistently happening in my life, and that's what
Yep.
I would share. Where God's working with
Yep.
me.
Well, let me share something to you, John, and to into nothing to lose, into hell. As we've been sitting here the whole time today, I've just had some things running around for me, and so I think that one of the things that you have an anointing and a grace for is to reproduce yourself. And I don't mean to make little Jon Tulios around the place, but I mean people who have who make a difference, and who I think there's a lot of sons, and I think in this difficult time of COVID, and where you've not been able to travel, you're not been able to be face to face, you're learning some new skills that are raising up people and actually empowering them by distance, so that when you actually get to them face to face, it will be like icing on top of the cake. It will be like the extra, the thing that adds to that. The other thing I would say to you, that again, while I've been just sitting here, I see it really, really clearly that you're coming into a season when N2L is going to actually have some great opportunities within the US. And some of the values that you hold to, some of the things that you've learned are actually going to get some airplay and get some things that were going to take place. And I see that there's some people that when they hear you and they hear what you're up to, just going to be just really stirred about it. And I don't know if franchising is quite the right word, because I don't think it is. But there's something that the Father, I think, is going to put into place where you'll have some other people catching what you've caught, that there's nothing to lose, and to be able to go after some things. And I think there's some particular some people that are really going to be touched and transformed by N2L operating in it. And it's almost like the Philippines has been your training ground. Yeah. And that's not to put that in any way, shape, or form. I've invested a lot of my life in that country, but it's not to say that it's not going to continue to grow, because it is going to continue to grow. But I think the Father's going to bring you into some opportunities within the US, because there are people around the world that need to hear some of the things that you've learned. And I would not even be surprised if some of the scholars that you've raised in the Philippines will have impact in other nations, and particularly in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think that's right, because I think what you're raising up, and what you're raising up is sons and daughters who are after your own heart, and after the Father's heart, and that's the interesting thing that I think you'll go into in a particular phase. I think there's a phase that the Father's going to bring into it. Like sort of say phase 1, if you want to call it, has been all that's happened here. And then in phase 2, phase 3 will be expansive or expansion phases. And that's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
There's some resources going to come quite supernaturally to you. And I even see some people being raised up who their primary role will be to bring about things, because I think you have a really good balance in, like, in the Philippines, where you've been working in the Philippines, and just in Bacolod, for instance. Now I know that you have the gym. I know that you have scholarship things. You have the cafe, which is a coffee thing, and just so most things that you do have a spin-off. It's not just one person. It affects, so the coffee, affects the people who are growing the coffee, the people who are selling it, the people that, all of these sorts of things have this knock-on, this effect, which I think transformation is that's just the very description of transformation. Because if you transform this life, it's not just that life, but it's all the people that are impacted by that. And that's, I think, what you do very well.
Thank you for that encouragement. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it feels like you need it. So, no, I mean,
yeah.
The kingdom of heaven is not activated by need. It's really activated by, just wanting to encourage you and just to sow into there. And I know it's difficult times that we're in, but there's some pathways that are flowing out, and even what you're doing with these further studies, it's just going to enhance your ability to be able to do some things in the US.
Yeah, that's Lord showing us a lot of things right now, but just really the idea of that, opening more possibilities and more things and more things to say yes to. So yeah,
absolutely. Daniel, have you got anything to say? I mean, I'm sure you do.
My turn now.
Yeah. Just before we go.
Actually, I would just, John. So when he started talking about it, when he started talking about some people, and then right before he was talking about some things happening in the U.S. and some of the people from the Philippines coming to the U.S., I really knew that's what he was going to say. I have the same, I would say I have the same feeling or insight into that's definitely, I think, going to happen. I heard you'd be in 2 other nations, but the Philippines in 3 years. Like I felt like a timeline of about 3 years, you'd be in 2 other nations. I agree with the influx of finances. I think it's going to be from a place you want to expect. You're not going to have to go looking from it. It's just going to kind of fall into your lap. It's just about doing what you've been doing. And the Lord's just going to give you some provision there. It'll be a reaping of some of the things you've sowed. So anyway, that's just what I have.
Thanks, Daniel, for sharing that. Thank you,
John. We really appreciate you coming on and just sharing some of the things. And if people want to know more about N2L, they can go to where? N2L.
N, the number 2, the letter L, foundation.com is one where you have an older website that's being not fixed, but being redesigned
updated
as we speak. Yeah. But we're also active on Facebook, same, and the number 2, the letter L, foundation, and on Facebook as well as Instagram, the same. So those are ways you can contact me as well.
Okay, so if people are listening to this today, I want to say, it's been great having you on here twice now. I'd like you to come back sometime in the future. We'll give you a particular subject to speak on, perhaps, on the next occasion, because people will have already got to know you. But listen, I want to really encourage people that may be listening to this right now or in the house. Check out N2L foundation.com, or just look on Facebook. At a really, really, you can make a significant difference in a person's life by giving to the foundation, by bringing some, finances in, because I know that the foundation is very trustworthy, and I know that it makes a difference in people's lives, that you can make a difference in a person's life by bringing some finances into it that cause them or help them to be able to go to college. Kids that wouldn't have a hope in being in a place in college. People that can go to some of your camps and can be impacted, whether it's the scholars in Bacolod or in Rombolon or some other places. And I think it's a great field to sow into. So check it out. Check out N2Lfoundation.com or on Facebook of N2L, and sow your finances, sow your seeds into a work that's really bringing about transformation of young people's lives, helping them to go after destiny and dreams, things that they've just been in their heart to do. So once again, Jon, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Say hello to Marsha. Give her a hug from us.
Yeah. Daniel,
And,
Mark, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Daniel. Thanks for hopefully you're going to thaw out pretty soon. I'll blow some heat that way.
Yeah,
all right, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you joining in with us today, whether you're listening to it now live or in the future. Thank you for your comments. But we'll see you next week, same time, same channel.